So welcome back everybody. I'm here with Mr. Pieter Cleppe of the Brussels Report, who we spoke to before, and it's very good to speak to you today, Pieter.
Likewise, it's great to be here.
So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this alleged EU corruption scandal that's been unfolding in Belgium at the moment, where one of the vice presidents of the European Parliament has been arrested on alleged corruption charges. Obviously nothing has been proven in a court of law yet, but the allegation is that she and several others were taking money from the state of Qatar in exchange for influence within the European Union. And naturally enough, this has sent shockwaves throughout the bloc, and people have been, there are many EU foreign ministers who were saying that this will damage the reputation of Europe as an institution. Do you agree with that assessment from several people who've spoken on this matter?
Absolutely. It basically confirms that the European Parliament is not fit to hold the European Union machine to account. The European Parliament, the reputation is not great. For years there has been scandals ranging from cash for laws, so basically people bribing MEPs for them to submit amendments to legislation, to MEPs themselves not being very transparent about their expenses. For years, until today, they refuse to disclose how they spent more than €4,000 taxpayers' money per month that they receive on their personal bank account on top of their salaries. So they refuse to sort of provide clarity on that. And they consider that an extra salary. It's known in the Brussels bubble that a lot of shady business is going on, and this really surprises nobody, except the people that were incredibly naive, I think, and consider the European Parliament to be some kind of a moral beacon. Of course, the precise allegations still need to be proven. In theory, everybody's still 100% innocent, but I can tell you that the Belgian justice system is not known for locking up people just like that. They will only do that when they have a solid case. Also today it was reported that Eva Kaili, the vice president of the European Parliament from the Social Democratic group, a lot of the scandal is situated in that particular group, which is perhaps the most moralistic group of all the factions in that place in the European Parliament. So it was reported that she has confessed. I think we're at a point where we can say that this appears all to be true and accurate.
What do you think of the fact that the Qatar state has vehemently denied any allegations of wrongdoing and has acted kind of almost indignant that they would be accused of being involved in this sort of antics?
Yeah, of course. We can only take note of what they have said. They seem to be confused about the fact that the Belgian government cannot sort of intervene in the judicial system. Perhaps in Qatar the system is different, but at least in Belgium and in Europe, the executive branch is separate from the judicial branch. And if the judicial branch decides to investigate whether there has been fraud and corruption, they can do so, whatever the Belgian Prime Minister thinks of it. Whether Qatar, as they have threatened, cuts LNG gas, for Europe. So I'm afraid Qatar will have to live with it.
That's one of the things that the Qatari state said, is that there's the allegation against them could potentially disrupt ongoing energy talks that have been happening between the two parties. But obviously in the context of the Ukraine war, Russia has cut off a lot of gas to the European Union, forcing the bloc to look for its energy needs elsewhere. And one of the parties I believe they settled on was Qatar. Actually, so far as I know, I think a quarter of Europe's LNG was received from Qatar just last year. So do you think they kind of have a bit of leverage or bargaining there to make this go away?
Well, of course, Qatar is very important for Europe's energy provision. But I don't think they have leverage. I mean, this is going to be investigated. If it turns out to be Qatar to be behind it, that will be communicated, whatever the consequences. Unless I'm very naive, but the Belgian, justice system is not perfect. There have been cases of corruption, but not at this scale. I don't think it's feasible that they say, "Oh, we'll drop the case because it's Qatar and we're dependent in terms of gas." That would create an epic outcry. That's not going to happen. Perhaps it may focus minds in Europe that if you want to shut down fossil fuel production of energy, maybe you should start with reducing imports of fossil fuel production, and only after that, reduce your own fossil fuel production. Because that's the problem in Europe. We forget sometimes that the Netherlands has one of the biggest gas fields in the world, in Groningen. And the Dutch government has decided to almost completely shut it down because of earthquake risk, they say, and that's partly correct. But you could perfectly, compensate people for, certain damages that occur when you have energy exploration. Nothing is perfect in this world. So at the same time, European industry, as we speak, is shutting down production, is suspending production, is moving production to the United States, to China. And still there seems to be no sense of urgency of starting our own energy production. It's true that the Netherlands, France, they will continue with nuclear, and likely Belgium and Germany will finally take the mature decision not to shut down their own nuclear energy production. Italy is exploring gas, is going to start exploring gas in the Adriatic, which is great. But nobody talks about the one thing that Western Europe can do to at least alleviate the crisis, and that is to restart fully with the gas exploration in the Netherlands. And that's really unfortunate. So perhaps, the Qatari threats will focus minds in Europe that this is serious. Energy is the basis of our prosperity. And if we decide to end fossil fuels because some 16-year-old Swedish girl orders us to, then we may be dependent on less savory regimes or outside of Europe.
Well, indeed, and I believe that a report by a German think tank just this week or last week said that the European Union is reliant on something like 19 critical raw materials, things like cobalt and so on, from outside sources. In excess of 95% of the resources that we receive are from outside of the bloc, and these are things that are essential to modern industry, like car manufacturing and technology and things like that. So many of these regimes that we're relying on are actually authoritarian states like China and so on that you probably wouldn't want to be doing business with otherwise. And I wonder why there isn't more of a push then at the higher levels of Europe for a kind of independence from that perspective.
Well, that's very interesting because at the moment the European Commission is coming out with the Minerals Act, as it's called, and this is just it's not even proposed yet. The Commission is still exploring what precisely to propose, but the idea is to take measures to try to be less dependent on certain regimes for some of the rare earth materials that are needed for a lot of production. Now, the thing is, in trade, you will always be dependent on foreign countries, and that's not a problem. Autarky is not an intelligent plan, and to import is fundamentally a good thing. I think the problem is more when you have decisions in Europe whereby it is decided to become artificially dependent on regimes like the Chinese one. Now, here I refer to the decision at the European Union level to boost the mix of renewables, to ban traditional, cars, and to force electric cars on the population. So these kind of policy experiments make sure that Europe is artificially dependent on China, because China controls a lot of these rare earth materials that are so badly needed for the technological preferences of the policymakers. Of course, the solution is to let the free market work and go about everything. And likely the free market is going to decide, look, we can go to electric cars, but that has a very high cost, because we, then become a lot more dependent than we already are to China in particular. It's true that also Chile has, for example, lithium, so there are alternatives, but it's really not so easy to make sure that we get all these materials then from Chile in this case. So ultimately, I think there is a place for some regulation to try to limit how markets go about in case there's really great geostrategical dependencies. Also, because if we're dependent from places like China or Qatar, often these are state companies, so it's not exactly a free market to start with. But I think we have to be really careful with it. And often the problem is at home, is with us. And the same is true for energy dependence on Qatar and Russia. Why are we so dependent? Because we shut down our own production. Why are we planning now to become so dependent on China? Because we dictate that we need renewable energy. We dictate that we need electrical cars. So this is all the result of very dangerous policy experiments.
What do you think of the recent development in the United States, where scientists, they claim that they have managed to crack nuclear fusion, where they got more energy out than they put in? Supposedly, who knows if it's true? It's just one experiment, and obviously it will be early days, but obviously this got a lot of people excited because nuclear fusion has kind of been seen as the holy grail of energy for a long time now, decades at this point. So hypothetically, if this became a viable technology and it came to market, do you think that that would spell a new era of energy independence, not just for Europe, but for pretty much every country that could afford it?
Now, look, I'm not a physicist, but let me quote the energy correspondent of Bloomberg, who has been following this, and he basically says, look, we have seen many of these announcements over the years. I can also quote the Belgian professor Furfari, who has also been a long-time energy official at the European Commission. He says, look, nuclear fusion is not energy generation. It's a physical experiment. It's great. But this is years away. Also, apparently, in the experiment, only part of the experiment meant that energy had been generated. What I find a little bit annoying is that this is presented as our great new hope, whereas actually we have energy, like we have nuclear fission, which is a proven technology that is almost certainly gonna deliver generation for nuclear plants. Which means that you don't even have a storage problem anymore of the residual elements. They call the Greens call it nuclear waste, but you won't even have nuclear waste anymore, and that's not speculative. That is only a matter of time before it's commercially viable. I hosted a podcast with a German energy investor, and he thinks in the 2030s this will be available and practical. So I think fantastic, of course, nuclear fusion. I wish it all the best, but we have fantastic technologies that green activists have managed to ban.
Do you not think that while it may be perfectly practical and safe in the modern era, the technology has come a long way from where it was decades ago and so on, the negative PR from incidents like Fukushima and Chernobyl, even if you could explain to people that things like that could never happen again, I think there's a sense in the zeitgeist and in the general public's mind that this is dodgy stuff that we wouldn't want to get involved in, that the viability of the technology is one thing, but getting it past the average person is kind of another. Do you think there might be sort of a resistance there in a lot of countries that don't already have it?
That's true. That's true. I mean, democratically, it's an uphill struggle. But I think what you're saying was true 3-4 years ago. A lot has changed. Yeah? In France, a majority of the people that vote for the Green Party are now in favor of nuclear energy. The Finnish Greens are in favor of nuclear energy. I mean, the German and Belgian Greens, the most fanatical of them all, they understood they have lost. The game is up. The lie has been debunked. After Fukushima, there was this British Green activist, George Monbiot, and he wrote a very interesting article in The Guardian where he said, look, I used to be against nuclear, now I'm in favor. And why? Because Fukushima was actually the greatest stress test ever for nuclear energy. It was a seaquake, followed by an earthquake, or maybe the earthquake was first. Anyway, it was both. Then you had a meltdown, and so these three hits basically only resulted in, according to the Japanese government, one single death as a result of the nuclear meltdown. Of course, I think 10,000 people died because of the natural disaster, the earthquake and the seaquake, which is horrible, but which had nothing to do with the fact that there was a nuclear plant or not. I looked a bit and I found some claims by NGOs that the total death toll was 200 because of the meltdown. Perhaps even if that's true, you're looking at an incredibly low number if you compare all the energy sources. The website of Oxford University, Our World in Data, they list all the energy sources and how deadly they are. And coal is, of course, at the top, is the most deadly energy source. And the least deadly energy sources are solar panels and nuclear power plants. So that debate has been settled scientifically. And I dare to say, at least in Western Europe, we have made enormous progress with everybody now admitting that this is a fantastic technology, and we need to return to nuclear. And of course, this takes time. Even French President Macron, he shut down because it was fashionable a perfectly functional nuclear power plant. France does not have enough engineers. They have been underinvested in their nuclear power plants for a long time because of the hostile political climate. So energy, it's not it's a 5 to 10 year thing. So it takes time. But the most important thing is that I think the population has turned, and politicians are also turning. And we have this fantastic technology in nuclear power to become as energy dependent as possible. At the moment, you cannot use nuclear power plants, for example, for steel production. The temperature is not high enough. But with the fourth generation of nuclear power plants, and that's in, as I mentioned, in 10, 15 years, which is basically tomorrow in energy terms, it will be possible according to very serious predictions. Which means that if the West gets its act together, we will actually we have it in our own hands to no longer be dependent on places like Qatar or Russia or China, or even within the West, Europe will no longer have to pay very expensive shale gas LNG from the United States.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Peter. Really appreciate talking to you.
Likewise, my pleasure.